Abuja gleamed beneath the evening sky, her skyline twinkling with power and ambition. Zamani Towers, the tallest structure in the city, stood like a glass monolith in the heart of Maitama. Inside its top-floor office, Daniel Harrington, the 38-year-old billionaire CEO of Zamani Group, leaned back in his leather chair sipping dark liquor. Cold, calculated, feared, and famously unattached. To Daniel, emotions were distractions. Love was a liability. His empire was built on logic, not longing. People called him the Wall. Nothing got through. On the other side of the city in Carmo, Grace Williams, a 27-year-old interior designer, adjusted her modest black dress in front of a cracked mirror. It was her first major outing. An elite real estate awards gala at Habib Royal Hotel. Her boss had begged her to attend, saying, "Make a few connections, Grace. You never know." Grace wasn't from money, but she carried elegance in her smile and integrity in her eyes. As she arrived at the glittering venue, she was overwhelmed by chandeliers, champagne, and the powerful elite of Abuja. She kept to herself, sipping water, silently dreaming of one day designing spaces this luxurious. And then she saw him. Daniel Harrington. Tall, impeccably dressed, commanding. The man whose magazine interviews she read in secret. The tycoon she once admired from afar. And he was walking toward her. He greeted her with the smooth charisma of someone used to control. She barely managed to return his handshake. But to her surprise, Daniel stayed. He asked about her work, and she lit up talking about colors, textures, and how design could heal pain. Her eyes sparkled. Her voice had conviction. Daniel wasn't used to passion like that. He offered her a drink. She hesitated. One sip, then another. The conversation deepened. Her guard dropped. By midnight, laughter had replaced caution. He led her to a suite upstairs, his voice low, his eyes glazed with liquor and interest. Grace knew he was drunk. She knew she should have left. But for years, she had dreamed of being seen truly seen, and this night felt like a miracle. She gave him her virginity. At dawn, reality hit. She turned in bed to find the sheets cold beside her. Daniel was gone. On the nightstand, 3 thick bundles of Naira notes and a folded note that read, "Thanks for the company." Her breath stopped. Her hands trembled. To him, she had been a forgettable night. Not a woman. Not a person. Not Grace. Tears fell freely. She dressed quickly, clutching the bedsheet like a wound. As she stepped out of Habib Royal, her world crumbled with each step. But life, cruel and strange as it was, had only just begun to shift. Inside her body, a seed had already been planted, not just of pain, but of purpose. 2 weeks had passed since that night at Habib Royal Hotel, and Grace Williams had said nothing to anyone. She buried herself in work, pretending the evening had never happened. But silence has a strange way of growing louder. She stopped sleeping well. Her appetite vanished. She would pause mid-task, caught in a daze, remembering his touch, his voice, and the envelope of cash. Then the nausea started. At first, she blamed stress. Then it hit her during a client meeting, violently, urgently. She barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. That evening, in the solitude of her apartment in Carmo, Grace sat on the cold floor of her tiny bathroom, clutching a pregnancy test like it was an explosive. 2 pink lines. Positive. A scream got caught in her throat. Her hand flew to her mouth. She was pregnant. With Daniel Harrington's child. Her mind spiraled. How could this be happening? She had made one mistake, one moment of weakness, and now, this? Tears streamed down her cheeks, not just from fear, but from shame. Who would believe her? Who would understand? Her family was gone, her friends few, her dignity hanging by a thread. And Daniel? He didn't even know her name. The next morning, Grace stood before Zamani Towers, its blue glass shimmering beneath the Abuja sun. People bustled in and out, executives, assistants, security. Her hand gripped her small handbag as though it could anchor her against the rising tide of anxiety. She walked to the front desk. "I need to see Mr. Harrington," she said, voice barely steady. The receptionist raised a brow. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent. Please, just 5 minutes." "I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Harrington doesn't see anyone without an appointment. His next opening is in 8 weeks. 8 weeks. Grace placed a hand on her stomach instinctively. By then, the secret growing inside her would no longer be invisible. She turned and walked away. As the tower disappeared behind her, a truth struck her like a slap. Even if she did manage to tell him, what would Daniel think? That she wanted money? That she was a trap? That she was some girl trying to claim a piece of the Harrington fortune? Grace clenched her jaw. She had already been humiliated once. Never again. No one would know, not Daniel, not anyone. She would carry this alone, raise her child in silence. It wouldn't be easy, but she would find a way. She always had. And so she whispered to the life inside her, a fragile vow wrapped in courage. "You will never feel unwanted. I promise you that." 5 years later, the city of Abuja buzzed with ambition and elegance. Samaru Mall, nestled in the heart of Jabi, was alive with Saturday energy. Children's laughter, the smell of roasted chicken, the glint of designer watches and hijabs swaying through glass doors. Inside, Grace Williams walked hand in hand with a lively little boy who tugged her toward the ice cream stand. "Mommy, can I get vanilla with rainbow sprinkles?" He grinned, eyes dancing. "Ethan." Her whole world wrapped into one tiny human. Grace chuckled, brushing a curl off his forehead. "Only one scoop, deal?" "Deal." They moved toward the counter, Ethan bouncing beside her, humming a silly song. He had Daniel's eyes. Sharp, dark, magnetic. And Grace had spent 5 years pretending she didn't see it. Raising Ethan had never been easy. The sleepless nights, the school fees, the whispered questions from neighbors about the missing father. But it was worth every second. She had built a reputation as a talented designer, carved a modest life for herself in Abuja, and, most importantly, never relied on Daniel Harrington for a single naira. She had erased him from her story. Or so she thought. Across the mall, in a navy suit and designer shoes, Daniel Harrington strolled with his assistant, inspecting storefront leases, giving brief nods to staff. He hadn't planned to be here. It was a rare walkthrough, a quick inspection of Harrington properties. He was mid-sentence when he saw them. A child, maybe 5, standing with his mother at the ice cream counter. At first, it was nothing. Then the boy turned, laughed, and Daniel froze. The face. That face. It was like staring at a younger version of himself. The jawline, the eyes, even the crooked grin. He stopped walking. Everything else faded. Daniel's heart pounded. His eyes flicked to the woman beside the child, and something clicked. He recognized her, vaguely. Faint memory. A black dress. A hotel suite. But he couldn't place it. He approached. Grace felt it before she saw it. A presence. She turned and her breath caught. Daniel. Standing just feet away. The man who had shattered her once. The man her son resembled too much. His gaze wasn't on her. It was on Ethan. He spoke, calm but sharp. Whose child is this? Grace's body went stiff. She forced a smile. That's none of your business, Mr. Harrington. He took a step closer. He looks like me. Grace stood her ground. Not every boy with brown eyes is your son. A flicker of something, anger, confusion, crossed his face. She took Ethan's hand. Come on, sweetheart, let's go. As they walked away, Grace's pulse thundered. She didn't turn back, but she knew. She could feel it. Daniel wasn't going to let this go. Behind them, Daniel turned to his assistant, jaw tight. Find out who she is, he ordered. The assistant blinked. Sir? And get me a paternity test. But how? Daniel's voice turned ice. Just do it, quietly. And as Grace disappeared into the crowd with Ethan, a new storm began to gather. One that would shake the ground she had so carefully built. The next morning, Grace Williams sat in her tiny office, sketching a nursery for a new client. Pastel walls, floating bookshelves, a quiet cradle beneath soft lights. Her fingers moved over the paper, but her mind was spinning. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Not after seeing Daniel Harrington and the way he looked at Ethan. He knew, or at least he strongly suspected. Her phone buzzed, a text from her boss. Just got a call from Zamani Towers. They want to schedule a meeting with you. Huge project. CEO himself requested it. Grace's stomach dropped. It wasn't a project. It was war. Across town, Daniel stared at the white envelope on his desk, hands clenched into fists. Inside, the truth he'd demanded. Paternity results. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. Child, Ethan Williams. Alleged father, Daniel Harrington. He was a father. For 5 years, he had a son he never knew. A son raised by a woman who vanished after a one-night encounter, who made the decision to exclude him, who decided he was unworthy. His assistant stood silently nearby. She raised him alone, the man said carefully. No partners, no child support, no complaints. Daniel didn't respond. His jaw clenched as 100 thoughts crashed in his mind. She stole my son. She denied me the right to know him. She chose for both of us. He slammed the file shut. Arrange a meeting. Today. I want to talk to her. Now. That evening, Grace stepped out of her office and froze. He was there. Leaning against a sleek black SUV, arms folded, waiting. Her chest tightened. She wanted to turn and run, but something rooted her to the ground. Grace, he said, we need to talk. She said nothing, but followed him into a nearby conference room her firm used for clients. The door clicked shut. How could you hide my son from me? He began. His tone wasn't loud, but it cut like glass. Grace blinked. You don't get to stand there and talk about rights. You left money on a nightstand, Daniel. I didn't know who you were. You didn't care to ask. He scoffed bitterly. So that gives you the right to play God with my child's life? Grace stepped back, heart pounding. I protected him. From me? From this, she snapped. From being treated like a secret. From becoming a headline. From a man who didn't want attachments. Daniel's face hardened. I didn't want attachments. Until now. Grace's voice cracked. He's my whole life. You don't get to come back and claim him like a property acquisition." Daniel's eyes turned cold. "I'm not here to argue anymore. I'm taking legal action. You'll hear from my lawyers tomorrow." Her knees nearly gave out. "You can't." "I can, and I will." He turned and walked away without another word. Grace stood frozen, her world unraveling. Again. But as she walked home later that night, holding Ethan close, one thought steadied her shaking heart. If he wanted a fight, he would get one. But she would not lose her son. Not to Daniel. Not to anyone. The walls of Grace Williams' apartment felt smaller than ever. Every corner echoed with the fear of what was coming. She sat on the floor of Ethan's room, watching him color in his sketch pad, oblivious to the battle his mother was about to fight. Daniel Harrington had filed for full custody. She could barely breathe. Who was she to fight him? He had money, power, and lawyers who wore suits that cost more than her rent. But as she looked at Ethan's innocent smile, one thing became clear. She wasn't fighting as a woman. She was fighting as a mother. And mothers don't lose. The next morning, she stared at the business card that had gathered dust in her drawer for over a year. Marcus Reed, barrister solicitor. Her university classmate, her quiet friend, her supporter from back when she still believed in dreams. With trembling fingers, she dialed the number. "Grace?" His voice was surprised, warm. "I need your help," she whispered. 30 minutes later, Marcus sat across from her in the cramped kitchen, listening in silence as she told him everything, from the night at the hotel to Daniel's sudden reappearance and the threat of court. When she finished, Marcus leaned back, his face unreadable. "You should have called me sooner." "I was ashamed," she admitted. He studied her for a moment, then spoke calmly. "You're not the one who should be ashamed. He is, and I'll represent you." Grace blinked. "You will?" Marcus gave a gentle smile. "I'm not just your lawyer, Grace. I'm your friend. You're not going to lose your son. Not on my watch." And for the first time in days, she exhaled. 2 weeks later, the custody hearing began at the Abuja High Court. Daniel sat on one side, flanked by an army of expensive lawyers. Grace sat beside Marcus, her hands trembling under the table. The courtroom was cold and unforgiving. Daniel's team painted Grace as unstable, a woman who withheld a child, who lived in a modest apartment, who lacked financial strength. They framed her silence as manipulation. Marcus stood, calm and composed. "My client is not perfect," he said. "She is not rich. She is not powerful. But she is present. She has raised Ethan with love, with integrity, and with consistency. Money doesn't make a parent. Love does." Grace watched the judge closely, trying to read the lines on her face. After hours of arguments, the judge ruled for a temporary compromise. Daniel would have supervised visitation 3 days a week. The court would review permanent custody after further evaluation. It wasn't a loss. But it wasn't a win either. That evening, Grace sat on her bed, staring at Ethan's empty pillow. He was spending the night at Daniel's mansion for the first time. The silence was unbearable. She picked up her phone. Marcus answered on the first ring. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "You already are," he replied. Grace stared out the window, watching the streetlights flicker like promises in the dark. She would not break. She would not back down. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The gates of Harrington Estate opened slowly, revealing a palace of glass and stone. Inside, chandeliers sparkled. Marble floors reflected the light. Every corner was pristine. But to Ethan, it felt cold. His tiny backpack hung off his shoulder as he stepped inside for his first night away from Grace. Daniel walked beside him, unsure of what to say. He had spent years negotiating billionaire deals, but standing next to his son, he felt utterly powerless. "Your room is upstairs," Daniel said stiffly. Ethan nodded, quiet. At dinner, a chef presented a gourmet meal. Ethan poked at the food, frowning. "Do you have Indomie?" Daniel blinked. "Indomie." Ethan looked up. "Mummy makes it with pepper and egg. It's the best." Daniel didn't know how to respond. That night, he stood by the door of Ethan's room, watching as the boy curled up in bed, facing the wall. He wasn't angry. He was just lonely. And Daniel realized something. Power meant nothing if your own son wouldn't look at you. The next few days were awkward at best. Daniel tried. He bought toys, ordered cartoons, brought home a puppy, hired a driver to take them to amusement parks. But Ethan didn't laugh. He didn't talk much. He just asked, "When am I going home?" And Daniel would go quiet. Then one afternoon, something shifted. Daniel walked into his study and found Ethan sitting on the carpet, drawing in a sketch pad. "What's that?" he asked gently. Ethan held up the picture. A house, a tree, 2 stick figures, one taller, one smaller. "This is me and Mummy," Ethan said. Daniel's heart ached. He sat on the floor beside his son. "Can I draw with you?" Ethan hesitated, then passed him a crayon. They didn't speak. But something passed between them. A beginning. Back in Carmo, Grace sat at her window, staring at the empty spot on the couch where Ethan usually curled up. She had gone to court. She had held herself together. But tonight, she broke. The stillness was too much. She grabbed her phone. "Marcus," she whispered when he answered. "He's not back yet." "Give it time," Marcus said softly. "Daniel might be cold, but he's not careless." I feel like I'm losing him." "You're not," Marcus replied. "You're just learning to share him." Grace wiped her tears. "I hate this." "I know." That same night, in the Harrington mansion, Daniel tiptoed into Ethan's room. The boy was crying in his sleep. "Mommy," he whimpered. Daniel sat beside him, unsure of what to do. Then, without thinking, he lay beside Ethan and pulled him close. "It's okay," he whispered. "I'm here." Ethan's sobs faded, his tiny hand clutching Daniel's shirt. And for the first time in years, Daniel Harrington felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Helpless, but also human. By morning, things changed. Daniel made breakfast himself. Burnt toast, lumpy eggs. Ethan giggled for the first time. Later, they watched cartoons on the couch, sharing a blanket. And when Daniel dropped him off at Grace's door that evening, Ethan ran inside but then turned and shouted, "Bye, Daddy." Daniel froze. He hadn't expected to feel anything. But the word, Daddy, echoed in his chest like a song he didn't know he needed. And as Grace stood by the door, watching them both, her heart twisted. Because something else was changing now. Not just Ethan, but Daniel too. The skies over Abuja were beginning to soften into evening haze as Grace Williams waited by the garden swing behind Daniel's mansion. Ethan was inside, finishing dinner, and Daniel had asked her to stay. Let's talk, away from lawyers and courtrooms. She didn't know why she agreed. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the look on Ethan's face every time he said Daddy now. Or maybe it was the man Daniel was becoming. He joined her on the bench quietly, no suits, no shields. Just jeans, a soft gray shirt, and an unfamiliar nervousness in his eyes. It's peaceful here, Grace murmured, watching the distant Abuja skyline fade into soft gold. Daniel nodded. I never noticed before. She turned, surprised. Why? I was too busy, too angry, too afraid of everything. Silence hung between them, but it wasn't cold. It was warm, comfortable. You've changed, Grace said softly. Daniel glanced at her. Or maybe I'm just remembering who I was before the world told me to be someone else. She smiled, looking down at her hands. I wasn't supposed to care, he added. Not about you, not about Ethan. But then you gave me a son, and he gave me a reason. The air shifted, hearts softened. And then he reached out, gently tucking a curl behind her ear. Grace? She didn't pull away. The kiss was soft, slow, real. But just as her soul leaned in, reality yanked her back. She pulled away abruptly, standing up. I should go, she stammered. Grace. But she didn't let him finish. She hurried toward the house, her heart racing with something that felt like betrayal. Of herself, of her boundaries, of 5 years of pain. She didn't want to feel this. She couldn't. Not for him. The next day, Marcus Reed stepped into her office holding a bouquet of yellow daisies. I heard you won the Abuja resort redesign bid, he smiled. Grace accepted the flowers awkwardly. Thanks. Marcus tilted his head. You okay? She nodded too quickly. Fine. But he saw it in her eyes. She was unraveling. Did something happen with Daniel? She hesitated. He kissed me. Marcus went still. And, he asked, voice carefully steady. And I kissed him back. Marcus swallowed hard. Do you still love him? Grace's eyes glistened. I don't know. But when I'm with him, it's like the anger dissolves, and all that's left is what could have been. A heavy silence. Then Marcus said, Grace, I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. Her heart slowed. What? He looked at her, really looked at her. I'm in love with you. The room blurred for a moment. She opened her mouth, but couldn't find the words. Marcus. I know, he said quickly. I know you don't feel the same. I just needed you to know. She placed her hand on his, gently. I love you too, she whispered, but not the way you deserve. His smile faltered, but he nodded. Then we stay friends, just like always. Across town, in a luxury suite high above Maitama, Vanessa Cole poured herself a glass of wine. She had just returned from Dubai, sun-kissed, angry, and ready for war. One call from Elizabeth Harrington, Daniel's mother, was all it took to ignite the fire again. He's getting close to that girl again, Elizabeth had hissed. She and that child are poisoning his judgment. Vanessa had laughed coldly. Don't worry, Aunt Liz. I have a plan. Now, she scrolled through her gallery, photos of Grace and Marcus at cafes, smiling, laughing, innocent moments twisted into fuel. But she needed more. She would get Grace alone, plan a scene, fabricate a scandal. And when Daniel walked in and saw it, he would turn cold again. Just like before. The doorbell rang. Her private investigator entered, dropping a folder onto her table. "Here's everything you need," he said. Vanessa smiled as she flipped through the photos. "Oh, Grace," she purred. "You should have known. Men like Daniel don't end up with women like you." Her fingers paused over one image. Grace and Marcus stepping into a hotel lounge. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The morning air in Abuja was heavy with heat, but Grace Williams felt something else pressing on her chest. An unease she couldn't explain. She walked into her office, coffee in one hand, her mind still replaying the kiss she shared with Daniel days before. She hadn't seen him since. No calls, no messages. Just silence. And in that silence, doubt grew. Was it a mistake? Had she blurred lines she promised herself she'd never cross again? Before she could dwell on it, her phone buzzed with an email. Subject: legal inquiry urgent consultation from client.n.adam@protonmail.com. Dear Miss Williams, I am seeking an interior designer for a new law firm opening in Maitama. I was referred to you through Blake Company Legal. Please meet me for a private consultation at the Horizon Hotel Lounge, room 305, 3 p.m. sharp. Regards, N. Adam. Grace blinked. Blake Company was Marcus's firm. The reference made it feel legitimate. She texted him to confirm. Hey, did you refer a client named N. Adam to me? Got a strange email. But no reply came. Meanwhile, in her sleek suite overlooking a Sokoro, Vanessa Cole watched everything unfold. She had bribed the Horizon Hotel staff. She had paid a waitress to lace the drinks, just enough to blur judgment, not enough to hurt. She had also sent the same email to Marcus Reed, pretending to be a client needing urgent legal advice in the same lounge. It was all timed, all staged. Now all she had to do was wait. At 3 p.m., Grace entered the Horizon Hotel, her heels clicking softly on the tiled floors. She glanced around, clutching her sketchpad. No one greeted her. Room 305. She hesitated. The hallway was too quiet. Still, she knocked. The door opened slightly. Inside, Marcus stood by the small lounge table, frowning. You? Grace blinked. Wait, you're the client? I got an email from someone claiming they were yours. Then it hit them. Together. They had both been lured. What is this? Grace whispered. I don't know, but we need to leave. But as they turned for the door, the waitress arrived with a tray. Complimentary welcome drinks, she smiled. Marcus frowned. We didn't order. It's on the house. Suspicious but distracted, they took the glasses and set them down untouched. But then, the room blurred. The air thickened. Grace gripped the back of the chair. Something's wrong, she murmured. Marcus stumbled. We've been drugged. Everything moved in slow motion. He caught her as she collapsed onto the sofa, and together they fell in a heap of confusion, dizziness, and blurred lines. And that's when the door opened. Daniel Harrington stood in the doorway, heart hammering. Vanessa's anonymous message had been simple. If you want to see what she really does behind your back, come to Horizon Hotel, room 305, now. And here he was, face to face with what he feared most. Grace. In a hotel lounge, half conscious, in Marcus's arms. Their clothes weren't disheveled. Nothing had happened. But truth didn't matter in that moment. Perception did. Daniel's face turned to stone, his hands clenched. He turned and walked out, without a word, back in the suite. Grace slowly regained consciousness. Her vision cleared. Marcus was already on his feet, confused and furious. What just happened? I don't know, she stammered, pulling herself up. Something's off. Then she remembered. The drinks, the setup, the strange email. Her heart dropped. She stumbled toward the door. I need to go. At Daniel's mansion, storm clouds brewed. Grace showed up within the hour. He was waiting, arms folded, jaw tight. Daniel, I can explain. Explain what? His voice was sharp, hollow, hurt. I was set up. I saw you. Don't insult me. No, listen. I believed you once, Grace. I trusted you. And you threw it in my face. Nothing happened. Marcus and I'm taking Ethan. Her heart cracked. What? I warned you, Grace. You'll never see him again. Her knees buckled up. Daniel, please don't do this. He's my son. And he's mine, Daniel growled. I'll raise him without scandal, without lies, without you. The door shut in her face. Grace stood frozen on the steps. Then slowly she collapsed. And for the first time in years, she screamed, not in anger, but in anguish. The courtroom was silent, except for the ticking of the judge's antique clock. Grace Williams sat still, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap as the final verdict was read. Primary custody of Ethan Harrington is granted to the father, Mr. Daniel Harrington. The mother may request visitation rights after a 6-month review period. Grace didn't blink. She couldn't. The world around her blurred. The judge's voice became distant. All she could hear was Ethan's laugh, Ethan's voice, Ethan's soft question from the night before. Mommy, am I coming home with you tomorrow? No, not tomorrow. Not for a long time. That evening, Grace sat in her empty apartment. Ethan's toys were still scattered on the carpet. His school drawings still hung on the wall. His pillow still carried his scent. But he wasn't there. And neither was her strength. Her phone buzzed. Marcus? She answered in a whisper. Grace? His voice was gentle. I'm so sorry. It's done, she replied, staring at the blank TV screen. They took him. Marcus hesitated. We're going to appeal. We'll fight it. No, she said quietly. I'm done fighting. Grace. I need to breathe. A long silence. Where will you go? I don't know. But I can't stay here, Marcus. Not in this city. Not with the weight of him everywhere. He didn't try to convince her. He knew. Her spirit needed space, or it would shatter. Then let me help you leave, he said. Grace nodded, though he couldn't see it. That night, she packed only what mattered. Her sketchbook, a few of Ethan's photos, a tiny stuffed lion he used to sleep with. By sunrise, she boarded a bus out of Abuja, destination unknown. And just like that, Grace Williams disappeared. Weeks passed, then months. Inside the Harrington mansion, Ethan moved like a shadow. Daniel tried. He really did. Private tutors, weekend picnics, toy rooms filled with everything a child could ask for. But none of it mattered. Ethan cried himself to sleep every night. I want Mommy. He barely smiled. He barely spoke. Daniel watched helplessly, guilt blooming in his chest like a growing bruise. Then, one evening, as he cleaned out his study drawer, he found a crumpled sketch. A child's drawing. A house, a son, a woman and a boy, hand in hand. Ethan and Grace. Daniel stared at it, something tearing inside him. Suddenly, the door burst open. Daniel's assistant, Aaron, rushed in, out of breath. "Sir, you need to see this." He dropped a folder on the table. Photos, messages, receipts. Vanessa. With a private investigator. With a waitress. With the fake client profile. Proof. Everything. The trap. The setup. The lie. Daniel's knees gave way as he fell back into the chair, the air sucked from his lungs. She didn't betray me. Grace was innocent, and he had destroyed her. That night, Daniel confronted Vanessa in her luxury suite. "You cost me the only woman who ever loved me," he growled. She didn't deny it, didn't flinch. She sipped her wine and said, "She didn't belong in our world." Daniel's eyes darkened. "I don't belong in yours either." And with that, he walked out, her spell broken forever. The next day, Daniel made a decision that startled the entire city. At a televised press conference, he stood before flashing cameras and microphones. "My name is Daniel Harrington," he said, voice steady. "I am a father, a businessman, and a man who made a terrible mistake. I wrongfully took my son's mother away from him. If anyone knows where Grace Williams is, please help me find her. My son needs her, and I do too." It aired nationwide. And far away, in a quiet town in Taraba State, Grace watched the screen from a small cafe, her tea going cold in her hands. The customers around her murmured in shock. But she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Because the man she once hated, the man who broke her, was now searching for her. Not to destroy her, but to bring her home. The roads of Wukari, a quiet town nestled between green hills and red clay, were nothing like the streets of Abuja. Life here moved slowly. The people were kind. And for months, Grace Williams had found something she had lost in the city. Breath. She worked part-time at a local design cooperative, living in a rented flat behind a carpenter's shop. Her days were quiet, her nights often sleepless. The ache in her heart never truly dulled. But she had learned how to live with it. Until now. Until the man who once shattered her stood before the nation, begging for her return. Grace sat frozen in the cafe, the echo of Daniel Harrington's voice trembling through her bones. My son needs her, and I do too. The room spun with questions, but one truth stood above them all. She missed her son. She missed Ethan with a pain that didn't speak. It screamed. That night, Grace sat on her narrow bed, holding a faded drawing Ethan had made months before she lost him. A crooked house. A stick figure with wild curls. Mummy Me, written in shaky block letters. She traced the lines with her finger, and for the first time in months, she allowed the tears to fall freely. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. Marcus Reed answered on the first ring. Grace. His voice cracked with disbelief. I want to see my son, she whispered. Silence, then a breath of relief. I'll come get you, he said. Back in Abuja, Daniel sat by the window of Ethan's room, watching the boy play silently with a toy train. He had seen the press response, news stations, radio hosts, and online blogs, all picking up his public apology. Still, no sign of her. He couldn't sleep, could barely eat. He had climbed to the top of Nigeria's business elite, but he had never felt so helpless. Then his phone rang. a number he hadn't seen in almost a year. He answered without a word. A pause. Then her voice. "I saw the press conference. Grace." His breath hitched. "I'm coming home for Ethan." He stood slowly, eyes stinging. "And for me?" he asked softly. A pause. "We'll talk when I get there." And the line went dead. But it was enough. She was coming back. 2 days later, a silver Toyota pulled up to the Harrington estate. Grace stepped out, unsure of how her knees carried her forward. The front door opened. Ethan stood there, barefoot, holding a tiny blue car. For a moment, neither moved. Then, "Mummy!" He ran. She dropped her bag and opened her arms. He collided into her chest, sobbing, clinging, trembling. "I missed you," he wailed. She held him tight, rocking him gently. "I missed you more than you'll ever know." Tears soaked her blouse, but she didn't care. All that mattered was the heartbeat she hadn't felt in too long, his. Behind them, Daniel stepped onto the porch, watching quietly. Grace looked up. Their eyes met. She rose slowly, still holding Ethan. Daniel walked forward, stopping just short of her. "I'm sorry," he said, louder this time, clearer. No pride in his tone. Just pain. "I didn't protect you. I didn't trust you. I let you go when I should have fought for you." She nodded, silent. He continued, his voice shaking. "You once said you didn't want my money, just respect. I didn't give you either. I'm sorry, Grace. Truly." Grace looked down at Ethan, who now held both their hands. "I came back for him," she said softly. "But staying, that will depend on you." "I know," he whispered. "I'm not who I used to be, Daniel. And I'm not who I was either." A beat of silence. Then she nodded. "Let's take it one day at a time." He gave the smallest, most grateful smile. "That's all I've ever wanted." And as they walked back inside, Ethan between them, holding their hands like bridges. For the first time in years, Grace felt whole. Not because everything was perfect, but because they were finally healing. Together. The Harrington mansion felt different now. Lighter. Lived in. Laughed in. Grace Williams had moved into the guest wing, not as a partner, not as a wife, but as a mother reclaiming her son. Days were spent rebuilding routines. Evenings were spent watching Ethan play, while Daniel tried to pretend he wasn't watching Grace more than the cartoons. They were not a couple, but they were becoming something new. And that terrified her more than anything. One evening, as Grace stood in the kitchen helping the chef prepare Ethan's favorite okra soup, a chill moved through the air. Not from the AC, from footsteps. She turned, and there she was. Elizabeth Harrington, Daniel's mother. Dressed in cream lace, pearls glinting against her throat, lips curled into a tight, unimpressed smile. "I see you're still here," Elizabeth said. Grace stood tall. "I am." Elizabeth's eyes swept over her. Wealthy homes may forgive, but they do not forget. "I'm not here for forgiveness," Grace replied calmly. "I'm here for my son." Elizabeth raised a brow. "You really think this arrangement will last?" Grace didn't blink. "I'm not here for arrangements either. I'm here for family." Elizabeth smiled coldly. "Then prepare yourself, because you're not the only one who's returned." Later that evening, as Grace tucked Ethan into bed, a knock came at the door. She opened it, and her breath caught. Vanessa Cole. back from wherever she'd vanished to, still flawless, still arrogant, still dangerous. "I came to collect what's mine," she said with a smirk. "And I don't mean Daniel. I mean your pride." Grace stepped out of the room, closing Ethan's door behind her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low. Vanessa shrugged. "Just saying hello. You look tired. Rural life must have been rough." Grace said nothing. "You know," Vanessa continued, circling her like a predator, "Daniel may be playing house with you now, but we both know men like him don't marry women like you." Grace's heart beat faster. "Watch yourself, Vanessa." "Oh, I am," she purred. "And I'll be watching you too. Because this little fairy tale, it doesn't end with a wedding. It ends with a scandal. Again." She stepped closer. "Careful where you walk, Grace. This house was never built for women like you." Grace met her gaze. Calm, steady, fire in her spine. "No, it was built by men who thought women like me wouldn't last. But I'm still here." Vanessa's smile faltered. And for the first time, Grace saw it. The fear. Not hers. Vanessa's. The next morning, Daniel joined Grace on the back patio. Ethan was drawing nearby, singing under his breath. "She's here," Grace said without turning. "I know," Daniel replied. "I didn't invite her." "She thinks she still has a place." Daniel sighed. "She never did. I just didn't know how to say it back then." Grace turned to him. "You need to be clear, Daniel. For Ethan. For me. For yourself." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right." And later that day, he told Vanessa, firmly, finally, that there would never be anything between them again. Not now, not ever. No second chances, no dinner invitations, no pretending. Vanessa left with her head held high, but her pride bruised beyond repair. That night, under the soft glow of garden lanterns, Daniel took Grace's hand as they watched Ethan fall asleep on the couch between them. "I want to build something with you," he said quietly. Grace didn't answer immediately. "Then, not just because we share a child?" "No," he said. "Because you become the only home I want." She turned to him, eyes shining. "I need time." He nodded. "I'll give you forever, if that's what it takes." And in the silence that followed, Grace didn't say yes. But she didn't say no, which, for now, was everything. The sun dipped below the Abuja skyline, casting a warm orange glow over the Harrington estate. In the garden, fairy lights blinked to life one by one, draped across low tree branches, dancing in the evening breeze. Daniel Harrington stood barefoot on the grass, sleeves rolled up, arranging the final candle on the table. Everything had to be perfect, not extravagant, just honest. A dinner under the stars. A moment that felt like a promise kept. He turned as he heard soft footsteps on the stone path. Grace Williams stood at the garden's edge, wearing a long cream dress and a cautious smile. "I thought we were having dinner in the dining room," she asked. Daniel stepped forward, holding out a chair. "We are. Just a different kind of dining room tonight." She looked around. The lanterns, the wine glasses, the folded napkins with handwritten quotes tucked into them. The one by her plate read, "I didn't know what love looked like until you taught me." Her breath caught. They sat, ate slowly, laughed gently. Daniel didn't rush. Not the conversation, not the mood, not the moment. Then, as the stars brightened overhead and Ethan snored softly inside, Daniel stood. Grace watched him, confused. Daniel? He pulled a small black box from his pocket and got down on one knee. Not flashy, not loud, but trembling with sincerity. Grace, he said, voice quiet, eyes glistening. I thought I had everything until I realized I had nothing without you. You taught me what it means to be a father, a man, a partner. You made me better, even when I didn't deserve it. She covered her mouth, tears already falling. I don't want this to be a second chance, he continued. I want it to be the only chance that truly mattered. He opened the box. A simple, elegant diamond ring sparkled beneath the starlight. Will you marry me? Grace stared at him, heart thudding. So many memories rushed forward. The night she gave him everything, the morning she woke to money on the nightstand, the courtroom, the screams, the search, the kiss. She had lost herself. And then rebuilt herself. Now he was offering a life they could build together. Her voice trembled. Daniel. He held his breath. I spent years trying to forget you, but no matter how far I ran, you were always the one I prayed would change. I did, he whispered. For you. For Ethan. For us. She dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming freely now. I don't want perfect, she said. I just want real. Then say yes, he breathed. Grace smiled through her tears. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him. They kissed, not with passion, but with peace. With everything they had survived. With everything they had become. Inside the house, Ethan peeked through the curtains, his small face breaking into a sleepy grin. His family, finally whole. Across the ocean, in a private suite in Paris, Vanessa Cole tossed her phone onto the bed, the headline flashing across the screen. Billionaire Daniel Harrington engaged to Grace Williams. A love that survived scandal, courtrooms, and the past. She poured herself a drink and smiled bitterly. I guess some stories really do end in forever. Then she turned off the screen and closed the chapter for good. The air in Abuja buzzed with a kind of quiet joy, not from celebrity gossip, not from social media drama, but from the whispers of a love story that had refused to die. People watched the Harrington estate transform, not into a grand ballroom or flashy display, but into a sanctuary of memories. Every detail was intentional. The garden where Daniel first apologized, the balcony where Grace forgave him, the living room where Ethan learned to say daddy and mean it. Everything came full circle. On a soft Saturday morning, beneath a sky streaked with gold, Grace stood in a white dress that swayed in the breeze, her curls pinned loosely behind her ears. Her eyes sparkled with quiet power. No fear, no doubt. Only love, hard-earned, fully chosen, and deeply deserved. Marcus Reed adjusted her veil in the waiting room. He smiled, not with regret, but with pride. You look like peace, he whispered. Grace gripped his hand gently. Thank you for never leaving. I knew you'd find your way, he said. I just wanted to make sure no one blocked the path. She kissed his cheek. I'll always be grateful for you, Marcus. He nodded, stepping back. Go. He's waiting. In the garden, Daniel stood at the altar in a simple black suit. No tie, no bravado. Just a man, stripped of his past, waiting to begin his future. As Grace walked toward him, holding Ethan's hand, the guests stood in silence. Not because of fame, but because of reverence. This was more than a wedding. This was a resurrection, When she reached him, Daniel exhaled shakily. "You take my breath away." Grace smiled. "Good. I plan to keep doing that." The officiant cleared his throat, but Grace lifted a hand gently. "I'd like to say something," she said. Daniel stepped back slightly, nodding. Grace turned to the guests. Her voice was steady. "I was once the woman who walked away from this city with nothing but a bag and a broken heart. I didn't believe in second chances. I didn't believe in forgiveness. Not because I was bitter, but because I was afraid." She looked at Daniel. "But then he found me, not with money or apologies, but with honesty. He brought our son back to me. He brought me back to me." She took a breath. This isn't just a love story. It's a story about a woman who thought her voice didn't matter until she used it. About a man who thought he had everything until he realized what he truly needed. A soft hush fell. She turned back to Daniel. "I do. I will. Forever." The officiant smiled. "Daniel." Daniel didn't hesitate. "I used to be afraid of love, but now I'm more afraid of life without it. I vow to love you with the kind of loyalty you taught me, not just in public, but in silence, in the small things, in the hard days." He reached for Ethan and placed his hand over both theirs. "To the both of you, I give all that I am." The crowd rose in soft applause as the officiant declared them husband and wife. Daniel kissed her gently, their foreheads pressed together, tears on both sides. And Ethan, grinning between them, whispered, "We're a team now." They laughed, because he was right. Weeks later, Grace sat beneath the same tree from their engagement, sketching a new nursery, this time for a child on the way. Daniel walked over with fresh mango slices and sat beside her. "Still designing?" he teased. "Always," she smiled. He rubbed her stomach gently. "Think it's a girl?" "I think it's hope." He kissed her temple. "I think it's you." As the camera panned out from the garden, a final narration whispered into the wind. "Love isn't always soft. Sometimes it arrives in broken pieces, wearing the face of someone who once hurt you. But when it's real, it rebuilds, forgives, fights, and stays."